Greetings, fellow humans, and welcome to No Tea with JD. Travis, sorry, no tea for this occasion as well, because we have a couple of discussions to do. I'm holding my wonderful Kindle and a copy of the Weightless one of three collections of Anais Charchenko. But I'm also holding near me Slouching Toward Nirvana by Charles Bukowski, collection of Robert Frost, collection of Walt Whitman, and I will be talking about one more collection, which is The Rains from Portugal by Billy Collins. Why? Why do I want to talk about these five collections? Okay, main thing is that I read all of those five collections in the last month or so, and the other thing is because, in the discussion of poetry and why you should read it and try it out, I think it makes a great case because I also, and in addition, I also read Tum Tum de Pasa y Griferia by Luis Perez Matos in Spanish. There's a wide variety of styles of poetry between these six poets. Some are from the 19th century, some are from the 20th century, and others are currently releasing titles. There is a variety, and there is a case to be made for people to read more poetry and just explore it. A lot of people say, "Oh, I don't like poetry," and what I think happens most times is that they're in a class, they read a poem, and they actually might even enjoy the poem, but a teacher has different plans, and they tell that their interpretation is wrong, or they make them feel stupid, or they just don't get it. They think that all poetry is that way, and they get deterred from poetry. I am here with a humble attempt to say that that's not the case. I also release poetry, but I'm not going to discuss my poetry collections because I don't want this to be like self promo and whatnot. I'll do a video specifically on my poetry and the six collections that I've released. But for now, I'm focusing on other poets because there is variety and there's things to be enjoyed. I will be reading Emily Dickinson so that I can also compare specifically with Robert Frost. Robert Frost, this collection I did read and I did enjoy, but if someone is trying to get into poetry, this would be one of the last books that I would recommend. It's not that it's not good, it's not that it's not well written, it is both. But it is dense, and this little book took me like a month to read, hitting it kind of hard. Because it's not a collection that is always easy to engage. It's not something that's immediately accessible, let's put it that way. Is it good? It is fantastic. It is very much of its time. It's a snapshot into life and during the period of time that Robert Frost was alive. Specifically, I what I enjoy the poems that focus specifically with Frost on rhyme, which isn't the case with all poets, and the shorter ones because some poems here are like 10 and 11 and 12 pages long because they're a narrative and they talk about something that happened in a farm with a neighbor that someone died and killed, etc. And since it's also poetry, it's a little hard to follow, so it'll require more than one read. So there you already lost people who are on the fence about poetry. If you're a more advanced reader, if you want something that you have to reread or that you would benefit from rereading, this is a fantastic collection, and Robert Frost is excellent. If I'm not mistaken, I did give this collection 4 out of 5 stars, mainly not because of lack of quality. There is a subjective nature to reviews because I couldn't connect with all of the narratives, and some of them I was just pushing through. So if I have to push through at some point, it's not a 5 star, no matter what. Completely opposite of him, I did read The Rains from Portugal by Billy Collins, which is actually, it was released 2015 or 2016, not sure. That one is a super relaxed, mellow collection. There's even references to Discworld and things that we can relate to. It's a very relaxed collection. Unfortunately, I can't show you the cover because I did hand it back into the library, but it was a very nice collection. Easygoing, not always rhyming. The the word relaxed keeps resonating in terms of what that collection is like, and it has some very poignant and beautiful moments. Again, I also gave it 4 out of 5 stars because it's not life changing. So you can see the quality of writing of Robert Frost was superior than to Billy Collins, but he wasn't immediately accessible and I had to push through. Billy Collins was a lot more accessible, current, made references that I got, is relaxed, but is not life changing. Now we go to 5 stars. Let's start. Where do we start? Let's start with Bukowski. Why did I give this collection 5 stars? Do I like every poem in this collection? No. Why don't I like it? Because there are a lot of mentions of alcohol and racetracks and whatnot, and it's not always relatable. Okay, so why did you give it 5 stars? Because when it was relatable, it was gut wrenchingly so. And Charles Bukowski, he sets up his poetry often like a joke. But instead of a punchline, the last line is a punch, but it's not a punchline in terms of a joke. It's just something that will leave you on your knees. The Let me show you. The structure isn't always logical. Flip through and see if I can find it. I should have crossed this. Let's keep this as natural and conversational as we can. But here's a good example. Look at how that sentence structure, that verse structure is. Like, single words, and you're not necessarily going to read that word like a statement. That's just how it's organized and how it flowed from him. And there's others that are even more crazy. Here's the terror. Look at that. You could overanalyze it, which is another thing about poetry. And overanalyzing kills poetry. The detail with Bukowski is that when he really lets loose, it hits hard. And some of the final poems were towards the end of his life. So it has that extra punch like, I know I'm going to die, but I have some thoughts that I want to share. So brace yourself. He has a very particular way of being beautiful. Not necessarily someone I think I would have enjoyed meeting. Another fellow author commented the same, Gabino Iglesias, because he was always drunk, he was prone to violence and whatnot. And again, just someone I enjoy reading, but not necessarily someone I would have liked to meet. I can do a list of those in the future. But that collection, if you like Bukowski, you're going to like Bukowski. If you're on the fence about Bukowski, it's not going to sell you or not sell you. It is him. And it is unflinchingly him. But it is fantastic. And I gave it 5 stars because on more than one occasion, I would chuckle going like, wow, this guy's a bastard. Or I would feel it in my gut, like, wow, that was deep. Next on the list, we've covered Frost, we've covered Billy Collins, and we've covered Charles Bukowski. Next on the list would be my good friend, Anais Shevchenko, and this is one of her collections. It is the Weightless one. And I'm actually gonna check, I have her 3 poetry collections. She is that good, and apart from a good friend, she is a spectacular poet, and I will get to her very soon. But I can't find the other one, but I can find Bright Needles. Let me show you the cover for Bright Needles. Again, this could have been more organized, but this is as conversational as I get. Bright Needles. Anais is a friend, sure. But apart from a friend, she is someone whose work I greatly admire and appreciate. And the fact that that we're friends, it just enhances the experience for me. It is the same as when I read Lillian Oak's work, when I read Amy Irene Winters' work, when I read Joshua Robertson's work, when I read Christy Stratos' work. These are good friends, but I read them. In the short stories by Kate Evans and the blogs by so many people. Short fictions by Sarah Brenton. These are all indie authors whom I know and whom I am very fond of. Going back to poetry, Anais is one of my favorite poets, and I mean that genuinely. This is not, ass kissing or anything or trying to pump up a friend for the sake of it. her three collections are as raw and emotional as anything that I've read. Um, she writes powerfully, disarming poetry. She does not hold back, and I appreciate that to such a level because it's not gonna be a fun ride. You're not gonna be like, oh, roses are red, violets are blue, la la la. It's not gonna be rose colored anything. It's gonna be honest. Bright Needles and the Whisper Collector are two collections that. Bright Needles is one collection. The Whisper Collector is actually five collections within one tome. Each movement has its own flavor, but it's always intense. It's very intense, and I always say it openly. It's not for everyone. It's not something that, oh my god, this is going to be covered in grade school. It's not. It's not. There's adult language, there are adult topics, there are adult situations, and it is way too honest to give to a kid, except the Weightless one. The Weightless one is a poetic narrative of a girl who's struggling with anorexia. It is a very intense read. The narrative flows a bit surreally, but it's a very important message to share with young men and women who are struggling with any, you know, her situation. The lead characters. I don't want to mention even names because I want you to go in as blind as possible. Yeah, I will give you the situation. She has an eating disorder, but that came about because of a series of situations. And it's a reflection of what it's like to be in that environment, which is not a healthy one to say the least. Institutionalized hospital, coping with that, and how it feels to be just completely disarmed. By the way, pardon the racket outside, but people are having fun. It's the summer and they have to make the most out of the sunshine. Hope it's not too loud. If it is, my bad. Going back to Anais, that collection is something that I would give to pretty much every single woman ages 11 and up. It is a very mature read, but I'd rather people being scared of the consequences of seeking control in such a destructive way than having them find out and then giving this as in a reactive mode. So that said, even though I'm fond of Anais and she's a great person and a great friend and she recommends my book, she's interviewed me, I've interviewed her, and all that. That to the side. When I recommend someone, I genuinely recommend them because I think their work is worth a lot to share. And because being an indie author, we don't get exposure. It's all down to word of mouth. But when you read something special, you should really, really, really go out of your way to share it with people. Which is why I showed you the cover of Bright Needles, and which is why I talked about all three collections. She is spectacular. Am I saying she's for everyone? No. And I think that's where one of her greatest strengths lies. I do suspect that eventually we're gonna see other stuff that is gonna surprise us from her, but at least for poetry, she's one of my favorites because she doesn't hold anything back. And because she touches on topics that would make a lot of people squeamish, and she writes it with no fear, which is amazing. And the last collection that I've read recently is Walt Whitman Selected Poems, edited by Harold Bloom. Some people write because they love to write, and other people, I don't know if they know that they will be talking across the centuries. Walt Whitman was alive in the 19th century, and this collection, at least, has very little or anything that feels dated or old or from the 19th century. There are so many things that are immediately relatable that it was really impressive to me. And I had heard the name Walt Whitman thrown around. I'd never read him. and I'm really happy that I read them right now. Uh, it says the back part says a revelatory selection of America's greatest poet by the foremost literary critic of our time. It sounds pompous and pretentious and kind of douchey. And I was like, okay, you know what? Let's read them. And I'm going skeptical into this collection. And by the end, the last four poems I was reading out loud. So somehow the word survived across the centuries. It resonates. It's very immediately accessible, and it is a five-star read. Not because it's Walt Whitman, but because it is a collection of words that have no time. Whereas Robert Frost, some things might feel particular, particularly dated or a snapshot from that. There's so many things in this collection that have no date, have no expiration date, just are. That I can't recommend this highly enough, and I will probably buy this or other collections by him. It is amazing, impressive. There is variety here, like I don't see in most of the other collections, and to have that be captured by a poet from the 19th century shows that classics are classics for a reason, and that when someone is touted as the best of their class, you might want to give them a shot. So, with that, closing statement would be if you didn't like a poetry collection, try another one. Don't give up. There's a lot of variety. There's a lot of words out there. There's more words today than there were yesterday. Every single year, there are more words that we can tap into and connect to. There are more classics that we have access to. And in a world that so often doesn't make any sense, a little bit of poetry goes a long way to make sense. So, with those thoughts and these collections, by all means, enjoy, embrace the poetry, and peace, love, and Maki rolls.